Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I'm doing my top 3 in every category, but this is my palette edition. That means that I have 30 palettes to share with you today because I have 10 different categories of palettes, because even though I have just done my top 3 in every category in all of my inventory for my beauty collection, my makeup collection, y'all had to have known I wasn't going to be able to narrow my focus down to 3 eyeshadow palettes. So I do have 30 to show you today because I have 10 different categories, as I said, and I hope that you're here for it. There's a lot. There's a lot. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high and colorful beauty and self-care. I also work as a field leader for Ulta Beauty, so I get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here, but ultimately I'm just out here talking about makeup because I like to talk about makeup, and palettes is probably one of my very favorite things to talk about in terms of makeup. So I'm here for it. I hope you're here for it. And if you are, I hope that you'll unsubscribe before you go. And with that said, let's just roll into this chit chat about all of the top 3 in the categories that I have for my palette collection. I tried to spread the wealth of favorites throughout my collection in that I wasn't just picking from one brand and one brand only. You all know I'm a Natasha Denona stan, but I do have an awful lot of Natasha in here, but a little bit of everybody that is in my makeup collection is also in this top 3 for the most part. Interestingly enough, there's one brand though that isn't in here that I am actually kind of shocked about. And at the end of this, you'll have to put down in the comment section which brand you think that that is, because I'm a little shocked. The last time I did this was in February of 2023, so just over a year ago. This is the second time I have done this video, and it was initially made, I believe, by Angelica Nyquist, but I have seen a ton of other creators do this as well, and everybody puts their own little spin on it. I do have 10 different categories to go through, everything ranging from neutral to colorful to mini to giant and so on and so forth. So there are 30 palettes to talk through, so let's just jump in. The first category I have is neutral, and for me, this one is going to be just as much a surprise to you as it was to me, I'm sure of it, but this is the Too Faced Born This Way Natural Nudes eyeshadow palette. I am not a Too Faced connoisseur, but I truly love this palette. And I think mostly because it goes from really, really light to really quasi pretty deep for me and my skin tone. It has a little bit of warm and a little bit of cool. It has a big shadow pan for mattes, a little shadow pan for shimmers, and every matte has a shimmer. This truly can be a one and done eyeshadow look palette if you want it to be, but it can also blend into a beautiful, like, smoky mauve brown eye as well. Like, I just truly love this eyeshadow palette. It is so easy to use and it blends really, really so well. This is the only category that I actually have 2 Natasha Denona palettes in. The next one is the Natasha Denona Green Brown. Now, some might argue that this is not a neutral eyeshadow palette, but it is. It's truly more of a neutral eyeshadow palette than it is anything else. Greens are a quasi-neutral in my humble opinion, and these shades of green specifically are a quasi-neutral, but this palette is mostly neutrals. Now, I will say that this palette mostly leans kind of the warm tone neutrals. There is a smidge bit of cool in here.
I just dug my fingernail into that shadow. Oh, can you see that?
Otherwise, this is a really beautiful neutral eyeshadow palette, and I love that it has those pops of green so that it gives you a little bit more to look forward to if you are just stuck with a neutral eyeshadow for what you need to do to have an appropriate eye look for work or for whatever occasion it is that you're needing to put makeup on for. What I don't love wholeheartedly about this palette is that it does have an awful lot of shimmers in it versus mattes. But I do think that this is just a really beautiful, really easy to use, and everything that you need kind of eyeshadow palette for a neutral eye look. The last one, and probably the one that I would say is most appropriate for this category, is the Natasha Denona All Neutral Biba palette. Now this one, what I love about it is that it has a cool tone row, it has a neutral row, and it has a warm row. All neutral eyeshadows, all beautiful, beautiful mattes, except for like a handful of shimmers in here. You can bounce around in the palette if you'd like to, but there really isn't a whole lot of thought process involved with this one either. There isn't in many Natasha Denona palettes a thought process that is there to be had. She has kind of a constellation of how she looks at eyeshadow palettes and creates them. But this one, truly, you can go just straight across and get the eyeshadow look that you need or want for whatever you're feeling for that day, whether it be a warm tone or a cool tone or a neutral tone, neutral eye look. And truly everything in here is a neutral eyeshadow shade. Colorful or rainbow is the next category, and I went more with the colorful route because a rainbow is just a rainbow at the end of the day, and honestly I have a harder time messing around with rainbow palettes than I do colorful eyeshadow palettes. The first one that I picked was the Mikayla Paht 2. Now the Paht 1 palette I didn't get along with as well as I got along with this one, but you will see that colorful for me typically means like these beautiful jewel toned eyeshadows. And what I love most about this eyeshadow palette, and I think the other two that are in this category as well, is that there is a little bit of neutrality in here for a more appropriate eyeshadow palette eye look if you need that. But it's got these beautiful shimmers in here, these beautiful jewel tones in here, and a lot more variety than you would expect from a colorful eyeshadow palette, in my humble opinion. While I do think that some of these greens are a little more out there and like I don't love wearing them on my face, I know that there's a person out there for them. I also know that these two greens could look more neutral in an eye look, especially partnered with some of these coppers and these golds. So I love this eyeshadow palette. I feel like Glamlite has a really great formula. Their shimmers are their standouts. Their mattes are really good, but the mattes in this one specifically I found to be really, really quite good. The next one would be the Kaleidos Escape Pod. Now this one was my favorite palette of 2023, I do believe. And it was the first time I had ever tried Kaleidos, and I cannot say enough about this eyeshadow palette. These neons up here are truly neon eyeshadows, and that is unheard of most of the time for neons. It also has this row of like more neutral shades here for that more appropriate eye look should you need it. But then this row of beautiful shimmers that are shifty shimmers and not just plain Jane shimmers. I would have sworn to you when I got this that Kaleidos had the best shimmer formula on the planet. I still think that they have like top 5-ish formulation for their shimmers, but also this palette was just truly beautiful. Everything that I can create out of this palette is gorgeous, and I love that it has that line of more neutral eyeshadows in it for more work appropriate eye looks if you need that. The last one is going to be the Blend Bunny Lure palette, and this one, I don't think I need to say anything about this eyeshadow palette. I mean, isn't it pretty? It is just so pretty. And again, it's got this row of neutrals should you need them for a more appropriate eye look. They go really, really well with the other shadows in this palette. They're just stunning. And I think that Blend Bunny's mattes are truly beautiful. Like they blend beautifully. They play well with other brands as well. No patchiness, no creasing, no fallout essential, like just truly beautiful eyeshadows. I don't necessarily 100% love their shimmers, if I'm honest with you, but this palette is just beautiful, and having it in my collection now, I couldn't imagine it not being in my collection in the future. Next, we have small but full size. So for small but full size, I only have one palette in here that only has 5 pans in it, but it is a full-size eyeshadow pan when I think of like the really expensive full-size eyeshadows from this brand. This is Natasha Denona, and this is the Ayana palette. And I just really love this because they are full-size shadows. You do have 2 shimmers in here and 3 mattes in here, and you can create more than just one eyeshadow look with this, but these are full-size shadows in this palette. It's just a truly beautiful, like, one and done kind of eyeshadow palette. It's just truly a wonderful, like, travel palette. It's got that really beautiful, like, cool tone nature of it. These 2 shimmers are just beautiful, to be honest. This is one of my favorite, like, palettes to travel with because it's just so easy to use, and it's Natasha Denona, and they're full-size shadows. The next one I have is the Viseart Dark Mattes. This is probably my favorite deep dark mattes eyeshadow palette that I have in my collection. I don't have many deep dark mattes in my eyeshadow palette collection. I think like the Kaleidos Angelica Nyquist, like Club Nebula also has some really deep dark mattes in it. This one is my favorite. Viseart just has a really stunning matte formula, hands down, and this palette was, you know, $80 back when I purchased it. I don't know how much they run these days, but it's just cheap and stupid and shouldn't be luxury, but it is kind of palette. But the quality of the shadows is truly remarkable, and I pick this palette up often just to deepen up a look. But it's also still super compact and easy to travel with. The one thing that I don't love about that palette is it is all matte. Even though I love mattes in my eye looks, I also love a shimmer on my eyelid. And the last one I have is this one, and this is the NARS Summer Unrated palette. And this is the true epitome of small but full size. This is their full size palette. Their eyeshadow palettes are always super limited edition, and this is one from a couple of summers ago, I do believe. But it has 16 pans of eyeshadow in it and fits literally in the palm of your hand. You can put it in your handbag. It is a beautiful formulation as well. And I remember thinking when I got this and finally started using it, like, why did I wait so long to try NARS eyeshadows? Because they are so, so pretty. But like literally every single eyeshadow palette they come out with looks the exact same. So I haven't picked up another one, but I would if they came out with one that didn't look exactly like this one that I already have. Next, I have minis, and you guys might be surprised, but I doubt it. The first mini I have is this, and this is the Danessa Myricks Experience palette. This is the first palette that I have ever experienced, funnily enough, by Danessa Myricks. And it is just 8 beautiful multi-chrome eyeshadows, very different textures throughout this, very different thought processes throughout it. You've got some duochromes, some multi-chromes, you've got some creams. It's just such a beautiful eyeshadow palette. And to get to experience Danessa Myricks at a fraction of what her full-size palette prices was awesome. This is still an $85 eyeshadow palette. So like $85 for 8 shades was kind of crazy to me to try, but it is truly an eyeshadow palette that gets pulled in to my everyday makeup application a lot because of how beautiful and impactful it is in an eye look. The only thing that it doesn't have going for it is all like shimmers and duochromes. But it would probably partner really well with that all matte Viseart palette. Maybe I'll try that. The next one would be the Sugarpill Fun Size palette. And the reason why I brought this in is because this is a truly perfect palette to complement any other palette in my collection. I probably pull this one in more often than most other palettes in my collection. Even though it doesn't look used at all, I use it all the time to blend out other eyeshadows in my collection. Like when I look at it, I can see that it has been used, but I'm not super rough with my eyeshadows to begin with, but also like it just doesn't take very much of these to blend out another eyeshadow that you're trying to blend out with any one of these colors, especially if I am trying to get more creative with my eye looks, which is why I brought this in, because it truly is one of the most used palettes in my collection. And the last one is probably the most used palette in my collection, and that is the Natasha Denona Mini Xenon palette. I don't necessarily not love the midi size Xenon palette, but this one was the first love of my life as far as this color story goes, and it is the one that I continue to pull for. It is just so small and compact and easy to take with me whenever, and this black is so superior to most other blacks in my collection. The silver is also really good. This white is really good. Like, it is just a really, really great grayscale complementary palette to anything you have going on an eye look. For the monochromatic category, I have Paht. So this is the Paht Major Dimension 2 eyeshadow palette, which is the kind of more warm rosy tone of the two that he had out at the time. He has one that's like neutrals and browns and tans and stuff, and then this one as well. This is so pretty, and again, it goes back to like 2 shadows, and you could be done with an eye look and it's going to be beautiful and impactful. But also these shadows just go together really quite well, and I think that you'll see kind of a theme here, because the next one I pulled in is the Huda Beauty Nude, which kind of has the same mindset. The only shadows that I don't love in this palette are these two here, and that's because they are glitters, but everything else in this palette I use and have had so many just truly beautiful eye looks come out of this palette. It is a stunning, like, pinky mauve color story that I cannot get enough of, obviously, because the third one that I pulled is the Natasha Denona Retro palette, because again, the pinky mauviness of it. Listen, this is my favorite. I have so many mauve tone blushes, I don't know what to do with them. I've also got so many mauve toned eyeshadow palettes, I don't know what to do with them. I cannot get enough of this color story. So I thought it was really funny as I was looking at the palettes that I pulled, but the 3 palettes that I have in here for monochromatic are all basically the same damn color story. Ridiculous. For Drugstore, I have a couple that actually surprised me, but let's start with this one. This is the Colourpop Baroque palette. I love this palette. This could have went into also the monochromatic one. This could have also went into another one that's coming up, but I truly love this like grayscale, cool tone, kind of swings a little bit blue or slatey color story that Colourpop came up with. And I have decluttered almost all of my Colourpop eyeshadow palettes, but this one still continues to hang out in my collection, so that is saying something. These two kind of surprised me that I pulled in them, because I am certainly not a Morphe fan, but I think that when I do have a couple other Morphe palettes in this like rendition of this, but when I pulled in this palette specifically to a palette roulette, I was actually quite shocked by it. I received this in gratis. This is the 9P Petal Passion, and this is what it looks like. And it is just really pretty. Like reds, pinks, oranges, all really gorgeous, and I love them on my eyes. This truly I feel inspired by. It is such a beautiful eyeshadow palette. I truly love that there are 4 mattes in here, 5 shimmers. 2 of them are like chunky monkey shimmers, and the other ones are just kind of more like satiny shimmers, but really beautiful and impactful colors, and such a beautiful formula in this palette, which I don't say very often about Morphe. Truly love that palette. And then this one, Revolution Beauty. Who am I? This is the Mini Nudes eyeshadow palette, and I think that you guys can see I actually have a dip forming on this one here because I've reached for it so dang much in my collection, but I just kind of really love this eyeshadow palette. And I know that this is a dupe for the Huda Beauty ones, but why buy the Huda when I've got this one? Like, this also came to me in gratis, but I utilized it in a like get ready with me using drugstore items not that long ago, and had purchased a bunch of drugstore items to utilize with this palette. And in that there was another Makeup Revolution item that I had purchased And most of the time I'm pissed off at myself for purchasing Makeup Revolution, but I ended up keeping both because I just love them so much. So I don't know what they've done recently with what they're doing with their formulations or their makeup line or whatnot, but this is actually really good. Very pigmented, stays on all day. I like it a lot. For high-end or luxury, I don't have like Chanel or Tom Ford or anything like that in my collection. So I went more like high-end route than I did luxury because I'm not spending $90 on 4 eyeshadows. That's just not happening. So there's that. But I will spend $125 on 15. Whatever. So I did pick 3 like high-end eyeshadow palettes that are some of my faves. The Natasha Denona Yucca palette. Listen, this color story gives me life. I want to weep with joy every single time I see this, and that is a little bit melodramatic, but it is such a beautiful color story. I love using it. I love it on my eyes. It goes beautifully with my skin tone. It is just such a really pretty, grungy green color story, and with kind of like that fall tone vibe to it. Fall colors are some of my favorite colors, my favorite time of year. So there's that. I love this eyeshadow palette, and it is one of my favorite high-end eyeshadow palettes. Secondarily to that, I have the Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 4 Transcendence palette. This one actually came to me in a lucky bag, and I wouldn't have purchased it otherwise, but I'm glad to have it in my collection. I did have one of my friends out there in the YouTube space send me a single of this guy here, which I love. It's the Chrome Flakes, and then these 2 outside are the water activated, and then the rest are multi-chromes. Again, the different textures, the different appearances, like holographic or duochrome or multi-chrome or flaky or whatever. Like, she's just brilliant when it comes to her different textures in her eyeshadows, much like Huda, to be honest. The one thing that I would say it doesn't have going for it is, again, this is a eyeshadow palette that is just shimmers, glimmers, pretty impactful, beautiful eyeshadow looks, but I would not be the same if it by ever slim of a chance had to leave my collection for whatever reason. Like, I'd be the same, let's be honest, but I would cry because it is just so pretty, and it's one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes to pull for when I want something noteworthy, when I want something that people are going to talk about after I leave the room. Last but not least in this category is the Pat McGrath Moonlit Seduction. And I think when I did the palette review on this one, I said that this looks very ho-hum, but this is truly a beautiful eyeshadow palette that I think is probably the best one of the Mothership palettes that I have in my collection. This one happens to be Mothership 10. I have 4 or 5 other Motherships, and this one is my favorite by far. I love everything about this. I have said in the past how much I did not love Pat McGrath's mattes. I love the mattes in this palette, and they're perfect colors to go with everything else in this palette. I love the special shades, and the shimmers in this palette are gorgeous. Like, everything about this palette I love. So this could not be on my favorite for high end. And ultimately, like, I just feel really pretty when I have this on my eyes. Yeah, I always feel like my makeup has come together, specifically when I have that on my eyes. For the indie category, I have a couple here. This one was my favorite palette for 2023. The Escape Pod was my favorite for 2022. So this one shouldn't surprise you because it was my favorite for 2023. This is the Odin's Eye collaboration with Makeup Just for Fun that was part of the larger collaboration with a couple other YouTubers. Planet Spirit with Batty Bean and Sea Talk palette with Lauren May. This one is Flora's Story, and I mean, it's just a beautiful color story. For me, it goes right back to those greens and purples. Green is my favorite color, and Like when I look at this palette, I'm like, this is everything that I wanted Natasha Denona's retro glam to be for me, and it just wasn't. But this is almost the same color story, and I love it so much more. So I'm not sure why I just don't love that palette, but this one I 100% would repurchase, would, if you could get it again, would recommend if you could get it, and would not want to be without it in my collection, because like I said, it was my #1 favorite palette of this last year. I also tried a new brand this year, and that was Adept Cosmetics. And of the palettes that I tried from Adept Cosmetics, I would be remiss if I was not entering this one into my top 3 in the indie category, and that is the Plain Jane. I love the Ninhydrin palette as well, but it really irritates my eyes. Whereas this one has the same concepts and does the same things and is as impactful, but doesn't irritate my eyes and isn't nearly as flaky as Ninhydrin is. But my God, this is just so beautiful. And it makes me want to get more from Adept Cosmetics in terms of eyeshadow palettes. And then the last one is the Blend Bunny Dollhouse palette. This also is one of those palettes that I think recently I put it into a video that was like, if I lost my whole collection, I would repurchase this, because this is just such a beautiful, neutral yet colorful, colorful yet neutral eyeshadow palette that has 2 rows of shimmers, a gradient up and down for each one of the colors that's in it. Like, I feel like this is a very versatile eyeshadow palette that every eyeshadow junkie should have in their collection. The only dud in this palette, I feel like, is this purple here, which is really sad because it was one of the shadows that I was really super excited to try, but it's been a real dud for me. But I love this palette. I love Blend Bunny. It's funny because as I'm looking through all of the palettes that I pulled out, every Blend Bunny palette that I have in my collection is in this. Last 2 categories. The first one is grunge. And you know, it just wouldn't be a great grunge category without the Huda Pretty Grunge. Y'all saw me do my palette roulette on this palette as well, and I love this palette. It's gonna end up in the top 5 more than likely of my ranking my palettes for this year. I just had a really great time with it. I used it in collaboration with the Moonlit Seduction for my palette roulette, and I mean, truly one of the best eyeshadow palettes I have ever tried from Huda. I love this palette so much. Additionally to that, we have the Glamlite Chucky palette. Like, if this is not grunge, I do not know what is. This is truly, like, I think of Avril Lavigne when I look at this. I think of Alanis Morissette. When I look at this, I think of emo and grunge and what I felt like when I was a teenager. This is everything that I think of when I think grunge. It's just truly a beautiful formulation as well, and happens to be nostalgic because I remember this terrifying little doll that would go around killing people. I remember those movies, and I remember my brother having a My Buddy doll that I thought was Chucky in and of itself. I love this palette. It will never leave my collection. And last but not least is the last of the Blend Bunny Cosmetics palettes that I have in my collection, and it is the Surge palette. Now, they recently discontinued this palette, and I know that this can go one of 2 ways. Like, I'm going to show it and people are going to go, yes, grunge. Or people are going to go, that's absolutely not grunge. It is, in my humble opinion, it is very grungy, because these shadows up here are very grungy eyeshadow palette or eyeshadow shades. And then you've got your kind of pop of neon too that you would have at like a blacklight festival or something like that. I really just think that this is totally like underground. When I think of Seattle underground, this is what the color story looks like in my head. So I had to pull this one in for grunge. And then the last category is giant palettes. So we did our minis and we did our full size but small. Now we have giant palettes, and I am as shocked as you are that I have 2 Morphe eyeshadow palettes in here. But let's start with this one. This is the Be Perfect Cosmetics Carnival 3 Love Tahiti palette. And this could be a rainbow palette. It truly could be. But it's missing some shades when we think in terms of rainbow. When I think of in terms of creating the perfect eye look, like this truly has almost everything you need. The only thing that I feel like it's lacking is a matte white. But I do think that it is not quite a rainbow palette, but it is a beautiful semblance of all different colors of the rainbow that you could possibly need to create a beautiful eye look. You've got greens, you've got blues, you've got oranges and reds. You've also got some really great neutral tones and some really beautiful purples and pinks. It is truly one of my favorite giant palettes and I use it so much. Then I have this one, which you guys have heard me talk about before. This is the Morphe Such a Gem. And it is just truly the most used, most beautiful purple pink eyeshadow palette that I have in my collection. It's discontinued. This row here feels very much like Colourpop Super Shocks. They're really impactful, really beautiful. I don't love this because it is a glitter, but the rest of them are just truly beautiful. And I would say that this is a palette that Morphe has in their collection that I feel like lasts a lot longer on an eye than most of their other palettes do. And I don't know what it is about it. I know that this is an artistry palette, so I know that a lot of it is pressed pigments, but they have other palettes that also have pressed pigments, so I'm not sure what it is. And then this one is also a Morphe palette, and this one is the Boss Mood. And again, this could have gone into also the grunge. As a matter of fact, I think I had this in grunge when I first put it into this video, but like at the end of the day, it's also a giant palette. There are 30 eyeshadows in here. It's as big as my head, not much smaller than this, to be honest, but I love everything about this palette. I love the greens that are in this palette and the purples and the oranges and the kind of deep, like moody tones of this. And it's truly beautiful on an eye look. And much like the Such a Gem, I feel like this one lasts a little bit longer on my eye looks than most Morphe palettes do. And I got this as a gift from a lady that I had trained. I used to be a regional trainer for Starbucks. I got it as a gift from one of the new store managers for Starbucks that I had trained. So it's got a little bit of the nostalgia feel for me as well. And I love it so much. So with that said, those are the 30 palettes in my top 3 in every category palette edition. And I would love to hear your thoughts, not only on my picks, but also what would your picks be? And also, have you done this video? Because I'd love to see it. And if you haven't done it, I encourage you to do so. It's really super fun. These are the 30 palettes in my collection that if I lost almost everything, I would probably be okay if these 30 palettes existed. Now back to the question, which brand is not in here that I have a lot of in my collection? I would love to know if you guessed. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you and yours are well. I hope that you are all healthy and safe and getting along as best you can. I hope that you are enjoying the weather. I hope that school is out. I hope that summer is coming. I hope that, you know, you survive a mild winter, whatever it is, whatever climate you have going on where you are. I hope that you are just making the best of it. And I just appreciate every single one of you for being here today. And until next time, bye, friends.